this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
T-Mobile is reinventing business internet with super broadband. Whether you run a small office or a factory of 500, connection is everything. Powered by America's fastest 5G internet, plus Starlink. Super broadband from T-Mobile reaches every zip code in the U.S. Super broadband, a new era of business internet. Visit superbroadband.com to learn more.
Fastest 5G network based on analysis by Ookla Speed Test Intelligence data 2H 2025. Speeds vary due to local network characteristics and management. Satellite requires hardware installation. Clear view of the sky with 36-month commitment.
Aging is real, and so are the benefits of adding Vital Proteins collagen peptides to your daily routine. New Vital Proteins collagen sparkling water. Your daily glow up now in 3 fresh flavors: strawberry blossom, lemon lime, and blood orange. Improved skin health in as little as 30 days thanks to collagen peptides. Cheers to that. Or go with our classic collagen peptides so you can stay vital, stay you. Visit vitalproteins.com to learn more and where to buy. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Jardiance has a big story to tell. Discover Jardiance empagliflozin 10 or 25 milligram tablets. Visit Jardiance.com, call 1-888-968-6648, or talk to your doctor to see if Jardiance is right for you.
A little pill with a big story to tell.
If you're a QuickBooks customer looking to grow your business without the growing pains, you need the Intuit ERP. Upgrade to Intuit Enterprise Suite in a matter of hours. It's the AI-native ERP from the makers of QuickBooks. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
You've reached American History Hotline. You ask the questions, we get the answers. Leave a message.
Hey there, American History Hotliners. Your host, Bob Crawford here. Happy to be joining you again for another episode of American History Hotline. And keep those questions coming. The best way to get us a question is to record a video or a voice memo on your phone and email it to americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. That's americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. Okay, today's question is a bit of a mix between reggae music and history.
Hi, Bob. This is Sharon from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm familiar with that Bob Marley song, Buffalo Soldiers, but I never was sure what a Buffalo Soldier was. What it really is. What is the story of the Buffalo Soldiers?
Here to help me answer this question today is Cale E. Carter II, Director of Exhibitions at the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum in Houston, Texas. Cale, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on.
Cale, I have this question as well, like Sharon, because I was recently rewatching Ken Burns' National Parks documentary, and he talks about the Buffalo Soldiers at one point in that. So, okay, Cale, before we get into the fuller story of the Buffalo Soldiers, let's start with a brief explanation of what the term Buffalo Soldier refers to in American history.
So, when most people tend to refer to Buffalo Soldiers, they are really referring to Black American soldiers who served in the regular army on the Western frontier in the aftermath of the Civil War. So they're mostly talking about Black soldiers who served in the U.S. Army between 1866 to around 1898. They're most about that time frame right there.
So you're saying they began around 1866. Did a lot of these soldiers serve in the Civil War, during the Civil War?
So when you talk about the percentage of veterans that the Black soldiers that served in the Civil War, and as well as the regiments that came after, or what we refer to as the Buffalo Soldiers, the numbers are kind of debated, but some sources would say it's about roughly 10%. Some would say it's higher or lower. But normally, when you talk about the Buffalo Soldier regiments, yes, there were some veterans of the Civil War that served in those regiments, but as for the exact number, at the moment, nobody can really give an exact number.
Right, right. So who signed up to be a Buffalo Soldier? What kind of a man? What background did they usually come from?
There was kind of a wide variety of backgrounds. You had, of course, the Civil War veterans who wanted to continue their service. You had a mix of freedmen who came out of the North, and even some freedmen who came out of the southern areas like Louisiana, who said, well, I want to experience a sense of travel and adventure. Then you had others who were formerly enslaved and recently freed who said, well, I'm going to join the army because, hey, this is a way to make, have a economically stable life. Because, of course, in the aftermath of the Civil War, in some areas there might have been economic opportunities, but in other areas there may not have been. And so with the army creating these regiments, is like there's a possibility for someone to say, okay, well, I can at least serve, make a career out of serving in the military, receive food as well as money and stuff like that. So it was a very wide swath of people that joined, and you see as the units move westwards, you see other groups that join as well. So you have a few cases of what we would now consider Afro-Latinos, but back then would have been like basically people that had African heritage that might have came from Mexico and a few other places. And so, like when you talk about the backgrounds of people who served in these regiments, it's a very diverse background of people.
Where did the name Buffalo Soldier come from?
So the name itself is kind of widely debated in the sense that historically, they would say that the name was given by the Native Americans. But when you talk to certain historians would say that, oh, well, they would attribute to a specific tribe. Like I know some sources, I think it was Robert Leckie who wrote a book back in the 50s, I think it was the 60s or 70s. And he would attribute it to the Cheyenne tribe. And then you had others that would attribute it to tribes pretty much on the Central Plains. Some would attribute the Native American tribes that was in the southwestern frontier. But ultimately, from the historical research, we really cannot say which Native American tribe gave the people these names, or indigenous tribe that gave the people the name. And as for why they got the name, even that is debated. So some would say that it had to do with the naturally curly hair and the dark skin that the soldiers had. Some said it had to do with the bravery and tenacity of soldiers under fire. Some said it had to do with kind of making connections between the fact that the black soldiers who some of the Native Americans first encountered, particularly in the central plains in the wintertime, were wearing, in addition to having dark skin, dark eye color, and hair texture, they had buffalo hide coats and muskrat skin caps on top. And one of the more recent things I've heard, which even that can be controversial, is that some of us say that, oh, they refer to these men as buffalo soldiers or buffalo men because they would be killed like buffalo, essentially kind of alluding to their perceived employment as shock troops. So essentially, like, nobody can really pinpoint how they got the name or really why, like, basically which group gave them the name, why they got the name. But what's interesting in all my years of researching this is that you don't really see the black soldiers themselves really adopting the name until around World War One. And so, ironically, even with the black soldiers that adopt the name, it's not the soldiers from the regiments per se, because when we talk about the Buffalo Soldier regiments, we're talking about the 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiment and later the 24th and 25th Infantry. But during and really after World War One, the people that you see that tend to refer to the name Buffalo Soldiers, and especially when it comes to black soldiers, aren't really black soldiers from those regiments per se, but rather black soldiers who were trained by soldiers from those regiments. And they're mostly taking on the name themselves in a sense to kind of pay homage to them. So case in point, the U.S. Army, if you ask them what a Buffalo Soldier regiment is, they will tell you it's the 10th Cavalry Regiment. And the reason why is because the 10th Cavalry Regiment, they have the iconography. Some people will say that when it came to the name, it was attributed originally to soldiers from the 10th Cavalry Regiment. And so when you talk to the Army, the 10th Cavalry is officially the Buffalo Soldier ones. But when we talk to most military historians or even like black historians like that, they will say that the Buffalo Soldier Regiment is kind of the definition I gave before, like black soldiers who served on the Western frontier in the aftermath of the Civil War, but really up to the Spanish-American War. So that would be the 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments and the 24th and 25th Infantry. And so the reason why I say all this is because during World War One and even during World War Two, you would have black regiments who refer to themselves as Buffalo Soldiers as well, like the 92nd Division and a few other units.
And it sounds like there's a lineage, right? Like there is, like, from the 9th and the 10th Cavalry to the 25th Regiment, this tradition is passed on. So when we look at the original Buffalo Soldier, the 9th and 10th Cavalry, What were their jobs?
So when you talk about the jobs of the soldiers on the Western frontier, their job was a mixture of, particularly in the cavalry regiments, a mixture of kind of going out and acting as a rapid response force. Like, say, for example, particularly what you see in the case of Texas, like, hey, a ranch got raided. And so they would go out to try to basically find out who raided the ranch and basically try to initiate contact that way. And so normally when people talk about Buffalo Soldiers, that's the main bulk they talk about. But in addition to doing the combat roles, majority of their roles out in the Western frontier was mostly infrastructure, like helping build roads, stringing telegraph wires, acting as an escort for like wagon trains and convoys that were making their way westward. But as time goes on, like particularly in the 1890s to early 1900s, you start seeing their roles starting to switch from stuff like that to like basically acting as kind of the precursor to the park rangers. Like I remember you mentioned earlier about the documentary we saw with Ken Burns mentioned the Buffalo Soldiers. That's the role that you start seeing a lot of the regiments start becoming employed in at the turn of the century. So like the 1890s, 1900s, you start seeing them do that. You see them go as far north as Alaska, where they're doing kind of similar roles of, again, kind of helping bring a form of kind of civilization and protection to the people that were going out that way.
It's really this.
What's up, fam? I'm sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together and iHeart Women's Sports.
Because let's be real, women's sports is giving us way too much to talk about these days.
The highlights, the rivalries, the breakout stars, the moments that take over your entire timeline.
And the conversations that start during the game and somehow keep going all week.
Every week, we're breaking down the biggest stories across women's sports.
We'll give you our takes, our debates, and probably a few disagreements.
We'll talk to athletes, celebrate big moments, and get into what's happening on and off the field, court, track, and beyond.
Because we're not just interested in what happened, we're interested in why everyone's talking about it. Because everyone watches women's sports. So if you're already a fan,
or you're just getting into the game, there's a seat for you right here.
Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, I'm Hoda Kotb, host of the podcast Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb. Okay, if you know me, you know this. I'm always searching for inspiration, for support, and useful tools to help maximize joy. So this podcast lets us uncover all of that together. We're going to have these meaningful conversations with the world's most fascinating people, like when actress Olivia Munn shared how she overcame fierce health challenges that she never saw coming.
I've gone through breast cancer and then helped my mother through breast cancer, and that was more difficult. There's a lot of people who understand postpartum depression. I was not prepared for postpartum anxiety.
Olympic champ Shawn Johnson revealed why she had no choice but to be a gymnast.
There was something about gymnastics that was intoxicating to me. It's given me a belief that we all have one of those treasures inside of us. We just have to find it.
Listen to Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke and Yerin, Samira y Gracie. I'm so excited.
On the bouncy bed.
You have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to Suite 305, where the group chat comes to life. What up? Es como que una forma de decir como, hola amiga, hola mejor amiga, hola hermana, what up?
Mira, nunca lo había hablado con nadie. Excepto con mis hijos. Mis hijos sí saben.
Yes. Sé mi amante.
Uf. Punch. Qué increíble. Ya la telenovela.
You're the only person I know that loves a yellow starburst. It's lemonade.
No hay alguien que te falta, como que tú dices, me gustaría colaborar con esta persona. This is Suite 305. Listen to Suite 305 with Lele Pons as part of My Cultura podcast network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Jake Brennan, and on the Disgraceland podcast, I explore the wild lives of rock stars and unbelievable true crime stories from music history. These are the stories you haven't heard, the kind you'll end up telling someone else. Like the time Paul McCartney spent in one of the world's most notorious prisons. Imagine that. You're Paul McCartney. It's 1980. You're an ex-Beatle. and you're doing time in one of Japan's worst prisons right there alongside Yakuza gangsters and for a ridiculous charge. Or the bizarre crime Lady Gaga is accused of. Who is the artist Lady Gaga is being accused of doing the unthinkable to after allegedly stealing her music and style to become famous? And what about that time Blondie's Debbie Harry escaped a serial killer? The man who had given her that ride she barely escaped from was Ted Bundy. Listen to Disgraceland on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is really fascinating. This is American History Hotline. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Today, my guest is Cale E. Carter II, Director of Exhibitions at the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum in Houston, Texas. We're talking about Buffalo Soldiers, the people, the men, and the song. All right, Cale, now to Sharon's big question, connecting the legend of the Buffalo Soldiers to the song, the Bob Marley song. Do you have any sense of the impact that the song by Bob Marley and the Wailers has had on people who are learning the history of the Buffalo Soldiers?
So from what I've seen, it's kind of a mixed understanding and appreciation of it. And the reason why I say that is because on the one hand, with some of the historians who study the subject matter and they hear the song, at times they kind of get agitated because like, oh, well, that's the only reason why people even acknowledge that this history exists. But on the other hand, with some of the younger historians and even some of the people I would say that have a kind of a broader understanding of like the history of the Buffalo Soldiers, kind of a history of Bob Marley, and then also a broader context, what you end up seeing is that a lot of the people who hear the song and they kind of think about like what he's saying and then kind of relate it back to the subject matter is mostly kind of viewing the Buffalo Soldiers as kind of like more so a representation of like, hey, these are guys that basically at a time that might have to deal with certain things, but on the other hand, that they were doing something that was significant. And dare I say, if you go into other aspects that you see, like again, towards like World War One and World War II later, where these guys go from just being seen as, oh, well, you're just black soldiers on the Western frontier to, in the case, particularly in like certain black communities, like during the build up to the Spanish-American War and after, being seen as kind of a form of protection for the black community as well as kind of a sense of group to basically have a sense of pride in. So to kind of bring it back to kind of the core question, on the one hand with the song, there is kind of a mix of, I wouldn't say frustration, but kind of like that, here it comes again, because that's the only thing we're associated with. But then there's also an understanding too of like, well, this kind of shows that the history of the subject, while at least it's a way to introduce people that may not have been introduced to the subject matter, it gives them a way to start asking questions and saying, okay, well, let's learn more about this history and why would he made a song? Because ironically enough, from a personal perspective, like I know the first time I heard Buffalo Soldiers mentioned in the song, ironically, wasn't through Bob Marley. It was this guy named George Duke. It was
George Duke, the great jazz artist.
Exactly. So, like, I grew up on George Duke's, I would say, mid to later albums. So, like I remember the album. The reason I remember the songs because it was from an album called Illusions. And ironically, the way that he describes the Buffalo Soldiers is, I would say, fairly accurate. Because like it's like, hey, like these guys come about, but it's mostly kind of an instrumental song. And that's how I was first introduced to the Buffalo Soldiers as a kid. And then when I started working in the field of like Buffalo Soldier history and Black military history, that's when I started hearing more about the Bob Marley aspect of it.
Okay, so let's talk about a lyric in the Bob Marley song. And by the way, I love the George Duke reference. I'm a fan myself. Okay, in the song, there's a lyric, trodden through San Juan in the arms of America. Is this a reference to the Buffalo Soldiers' role in the Spanish-American War?
That's from my understanding, yes. And really, it actually, and it's interesting that he brings that up, because if you think about the Buffalo Soldiers in terms of their understanding within the American public, it wouldn't be until the Spanish-American War where these units are actually kind of acknowledged and kind of spoken about highly in the American public, because prior to on the Western frontier, they're out there, but the only people that would know about them is people that are in the proximity of them. But with the Spanish-American War, when they come back from the Western frontier, they started heading back eastwards. That's when you start seeing like aspects of the Black community start knowing about them more broadly. But when you talk about the success in the Spanish-American War, that's when you start seeing Americans start knowing about these regiments, because you have between their actions while fighting in these battles, but then you also have people like Teddy Roosevelt and others who sing the high praises of these soldiers. So with him adding that line in there, that does allude to the kind of not only their service in the Spanish-American War, but kind of like the way that people start understanding and really start acknowledging their service in terms of kind of the American historical standpoint.
Well, you're talking about the Spanish-American War. This is the height of Jim Crow in the United States. So how were these soldiers treated during and after the war? How were the Buffalo Soldiers treated?
So prior to the war, when they're on the Western frontier, while they are dealing with racism and systemic racism, there's this one instant point that I want to say one of the guys I used to work with made, is that while on the Western frontier, people would be racist, you only could be so racist to someone who you need to protect you. Whereas when you see the regiments start coming back to the Deep South in preparation of the stage for Cuba, this is when you start seeing a lot of the soldiers really start encountering like really truly systemic Jim Crow laws. And almost immediately there's a series of clashes. So like there was this one clash, I think that occurred in Alabama. There was a clash that occurred in Florida.
Well, when you say, what do you mean by clash?
So by clash, it's normally where you would have these soldiers that will return to the Deep South. And again, when a lot of these soldiers might have left or made their way out, they might have made their way out during the Reconstruction period. And during that time, the South was in kind of a different flux, to where on the one hand, recently freed people were gaining rights, but you still kind of had pushback from the people that were formerly in power that was in the South. So it was kind of this mix to where you could gain freedoms or gain the fruits of citizenship, but at the same time there was pushback, but you might have had some protections. Whereas by the time they come back in the 1890s, this is where you start seeing where, again, Jim Crow is set in stone, Black codes are set in stone. And one of the things that kind of comes up with the arrival of these Black troops, particularly in a lot of southern areas, is like I mentioned before, on the one hand, the Black communities are like, wow, these are soldiers, they're professional soldiers, and like they are a sense of pride. But in a lot of the smaller communities, it becomes a concern, because suddenly you have a regiment, like you may have like a small Black population that by and large is fairly contained, but then suddenly you may have a regiment or two that's anywhere between 600 to 1,000, in some cases 2,000, that are armed, that are trained, and more importantly, that they will in many cases refuse to adhere to Jim Crow laws, because they're like, okay, well, out in the West, we're treated not really as full equals, but we're treated with a level of respect, whereas here we're not treated with that same respect. And it's like, well, if you're not going to respect me as an individual, at least respect the uniform that I'm serving with, which is the U.S. Army. So
you talk about this this lineage, right, of the Buffalo Soldiers. So you have the original 9th and 10th Cavalries, the original Buffalo Soldiers, and then the Buffalo Soldiers who served in World War I. And then you talk about the 92nd, was it, in World War II?
Well, 92nd history starts in World War I.
Okay.
But so like normally the legacy component that really starts in earnest during World War I, but it really takes off during World War II.
Okay.
So by the time World War I comes around, in the drive to get Black soldiers or Black people to participate in the war effort as well as enlist, you start seeing where some people start highlighting the stories of Blacks that served in the military prior. And up to that point, really prior to the Spanish-American War, the main conflict that people tend to know about in the American, let's call it the American Civil War. And while there was a lot of Blacks that served in the American Civil War, the Spanish-American War was really that first conflict since the Civil War where you can make the argument that basically America as a country, both North and South, was united and fighting against a common enemy. And so because of that, you see where some of the Black leadership and some of the Black advocates start kind of highlighting like, hey, like these are guys that like basically be like the guys who fought against the Spanish in Cuba and stuff like that. And then from the military side, when they start having to raise these Black units, because keep in mind, even though it's easy for us, it's kind of difficult for us to think about this now, but back in World War One and even at the start of World War II, America didn't really have a large military. Like we was mostly a frontier army. And so we had to rapidly expand the army, and we rapidly expanded the army that also included the rapid expansion of Black units. And so to help ease that rapid expansion and help accelerate the training, you see where a lot of veteran soldiers from the 9th Cavalry Regiment, the 10th Cavalry Regiment, the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiment, they're literally, in a sense, kind of taken from their home regiment or basically transferred from their home regiment to these new regiments. So like in the case of the 92nd, some guys end up in the 367th Infantry Regiment or in Pioneer Infantry Regiments, Labor Battalion, stuff like that. And so because a lot of these guys that transfer to these regiments, some of these guys have been in the military some have been in there for a few years, but you had some guys that were career army. So some of these guys have served since the 1880s. And like, if you imagine, like you have there's like a movie or something that you have a gruff old sergeant that comes in, like normally we see a gruff old sergeant come in and yell at the troops. With a lot of these guys that's coming in, some of them would have a certain degree of respect for him because like, hey, this guy, like he's traveled, he saw some things. And so what you end up seeing is that with some of these older sergeants and older NCOs that train these guys, they start telling them about, oh, well, we heard that we was called this, but it might have been like, we don't really know how the story got out or how they told them, but for some reason, the younger guys that was brought in for the military service during World War I, they cleaved to it, like, oh, like, wow, like, because it's kind of seen as a sense of like, hey, like, they're from our community. These guys have proven their mettle. And also, if you about to tell us, it's kind of a cool nickname. So it's like, okay, well.
It certainly is.
So it's like, oh, well, they're called Buffalo Soldiers. Well, how do we carry this on? Like, oh, well, we're the Buffaloes. And then in fact, so the first regiment you see that takes on that moniker is the regiment I mentioned before, the 367th Infantry Regiment. And in fact, if people are curious about that, like they can actually, the National Archive had was a light regimental history booklet of the 367th in World War I, and they actually had their regimental crest, and it literally has a buffalo head. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what the information says, but it essentially says that, hey, we take this name to pay homage to the guys who came before us who were referred to by the Native Americans as Buffalo Soldiers. And so you see it kind of take off a little bit in World War I, but by the time World War II comes around in 1941, that's when you see it takes off to a different level, because on the one hand, with the actual Buffalo Soldier regiments, they're still around as segregated units by this point, but the 9th and 10th Cavalry, they're literally the last of the horse cavalry in the U.S. Army. By the time World War II comes around, most of the cavalry guys, they traded their horses for tanks. And so with the 9th and 10th, and later what became known as the 2nd Cavalry Division, they literally are the last horse soldiers in the U.S. Army, where these guys are trained how to ride horses, how to do horse drill, and basically kind of do combat as like true cavalry. And of course, the 24th and 25th, they fight in the Pacific during this time. But in addition, as in World War I, you had where a lot of these guys were kind of sent to other regiments to help train them. So you see guys who was in these original Buffalo Soldier regiments ending up in everything from tank battalions, tank destroyer battalions, field artillery units, field artillery battalions. And so what's interesting is that when you look through the regimental records of some of these units, like a primary example will be the 846 Tank Destroyer Battalion out of Camp Livingston, Louisiana. Like, even though the regiment will ultimately get disbanded by 1943, when you look at the regimental crest and even the name, they have a buffalo on their regimental crest. And they literally say, like, the reason why we take this name, we have a buffalo on, is to pay homage to the guys who came before us. So as you mentioned before, it's kind of a sense of like, hey, let's carry on this legacy of the guys who served before us and kind of carry it on as long as we can. Now, by the time World War II ends and when you get to 1948, the order to integrate the Army comes through. And by that point, the only regiment of the original Buffalo Soldiers that's left is the 24th Infantry, because the 9th and 10th Cavalry, they were deactivated in 1944. The 25th Infantry Regiment, by and large, was deactivated by 1946. Like, I know some of the research I was doing, some of the regiments, some of the battalions survived on as training units in various capacities until about 1950. But with the 24th being the last of the original regiments, you see where the legacy starts kind of going from, again, kind of the focus on the specific regiments to mostly Black soldiers who served in the segregated army and kind of came under the tutelage of those men. And so when the 24th Infantry Regiment is deactivated in 1951, and they're said, okay, well, look, like that regiment's officially disbanded, that kind of marks the end of the original Buffalo Soldiers.
Cale, I've enjoyed our time together so much. Thank you so much for answering Sharon's question. I've been talking to Cale E. Carter, the second director of exhibitions at the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum in Houston, Texas. If you're down there, check it out. Say hello to Cale. I know I will. Cale, thank you for joining us today on American History Hotline.
Thank y'all. Hopefully I'll see y'all next time.
You've been listening to American History Hotline, a production of iHeart Podcasts and Scratch Track Productions. The show's executive producer is James Morrison. Our executive producers from iHeart are Jordan Runtall and Jason English. Original music composed by me, Bob Crawford. Please keep in touch. Our email is americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. If you like the show, please tell your friends and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Feel free to hit me up on social media to ask a history question or to let me know what you think of the show. You can find me at Bob Crawford Base. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential and it's also elusive. But now there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Sweet 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up? You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst. It's lemonade.
This is Sweet 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Sweet 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.